Good morning or good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you are and when you're joining us. My name is Amy Frampton. I lead marketing at Bamboo HR, and I am so excited to present this webinar alongside with our partner Workable. We are joined today virtually by our expert panel, Emar, who is the Director of Culture at HubSpot, Nadine, who's Director of People at 10% Happier, an app I use actively, and Courtney, who's the Vice President of People at Hologram. And today, we're really going to have a great discussion, and they're going to help us learn how to foster a healthier, happier, more inclusive workplace. So as widely predicted, the great resignation looms ahead. Candidates are in search of a healthier workplace culture. And in this session, we're going to focus on tangible actions we can take to foster an authentic environment that prioritizes mental health, where everyone can bring their full selves to work. Now, before we get started, I'd love to do a sound check. Can you please type 1 into the chat box if you can hear me? I'm preparing to be overwhelmed.
Wow.
Yes, 1. Oh, if they were all dollar bills. Great. It sounds like everyone can hear us. So let me really quickly walk through the agenda and then and the topics we're going to cover, and then we'll introduce more fully our panel. So first, we're going to talk about breaking down mental health in the workplace, and then mental health in a post-pandemic world. I think we all realize we've all been affected by this pandemic in different ways, and so I'm excited to talk through that. And then how do we have steps to build an authentic workplace culture? And so then we'll go into Q&A. So feel free to start putting in your questions in the Q&A tool now, and we're going to do our very best to answer as many questions as we can. So get those in now. And now on to our fabulous panelists. Starting with you, Emar, we'd love it if you could tell us a bit about your role and what specifically interests you about workplace culture and mental health.
Yeah, of course. So first off, thank you so much for having me here today, Amy and Carolyn. It's great to be here with all the other panelists and participants. So my name is Emer Marinan. I'm coming to you from my kids' playroom in Dublin, Ireland. And before anything, I'm a mom of 2. So I have 2 little girls. Evine is 4 and Fia is 2. And as Amy said, I'm Director of Culture at HubSpot. So just for context, HubSpot is a leading customer relationship management or CRM platform that provides software and support to help businesses grow better. And at HubSpot, we're completely culture obsessed, so much so that we published a HubSpot culture code, which has had 5 million views externally. And so really my job is to help bring that code to life, to enable our culture, help engage our employees through programming and experiences, and help build a company culture that empowers people to do their best work. And to the latter part of your question, that really is what interests me about workplace and workplace culture and mental health, being able to have a direct impact on people's growth and honestly people's lives, both personally and professionally, especially like you said, knowing that right now the vast majority of us are struggling with mental health and general well-being as the pandemic continues and just the craziness of the world around us right now. So like I said, I can't wait to learn more and share a little bit more about what we're doing today.
Thanks so much. Nadine?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I am the Director of People at 10% Happier. For those of you who may not be familiar with us, 10% Happier is a company with an app teaching people to meditate. And we're a fairly small team based out of Boston, but we have a lot of people working remotely across the country. I have been doing human resources for over 15 years now. And I care a lot about mental health and mental health in the workplace because I care deeply about human beings. And it's been my experience over the last 15 years that when we are supporting employees as their whole selves, including their mental health and well-being, that's when we truly see employees reaching their full potential. and when we see the highest level of productivity at work. And so my main goal in my role is to give people a really good employee experience, and that requires viewing people as a whole person.
That's wonderful. Thanks, Nadine. And I have both read the book and have the app and use it. So I have to quickly give a shout out for that. It's a great way to think about it. And Courtney, over to you.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for having us here to talk about this important topic. I'm Courtney Sider. I'm coming to you from Nashville, Tennessee, and I am the VP of People at Hologram, which is a cellular platform for the Internet of Things. Basically, we connect anything at all to the internet, from medical devices to agriculture devices to the scooters that might be roaming around your city at this moment. Many of them are powered by Hologram. And, that's a really sort of like tech topic that's complicated and hard to understand, but any company, no matter what it does, only works because of the people who are there every day, supporting it, doing the work, collaborating, working together helpfully, or sometimes working together unhelpfully to create products. And that's kind of the interest for me in mental health, because the workplace doesn't work without people, and people are very complicated and endlessly fascinating. And especially right now, we need a little extra support. We need to be patient with one another and have a little bit more grace with one another. We've just gone through something that is unprecedented and still sort of like ununderstandable to most of us. And there's a temptation to just like pop right back into work and productivity and get things done like everything's normal, but nothing is normal at all. And I think it's fine and healthy to embrace that and talk about that. And that's one of my sort of core tenets, is making the implicit explicit, naming the thing and saying like, this is what's going on. So that's kind of my interest in mental health and people in general, and creating healthy workplaces. And the biggest reason that I'm glad we're all here to talk about this today.
Thank you so much, Courtney. It's so great to be here with all of you and with all of our attendees. We've got a full room, so to speak, virtual room here today, and we're glad to be together. In fact, let's go to our full room here. Before we hop into the next section, I want to take a pulse check with all of you that are tuning in to our virtual room. The only way that, we've been talking already about the only way that we can truly bring our full selves to work is to work and function in an authentic workplace culture. Our full selves, of course, go way beyond the 8-hour workday. We have friends and we're family members, and we've all endured a pandemic and all the difficulties that come with it. I think you'd be hard pressed to find anyone who's made it through without some level of burnout. And so I'd like everyone to answer, do you feel comfortable discussing your mental health in your workplace culture? And we'll give you just a moment on that. That's great. I love pulse surveys. They're so fast and helpful. So it looks like that we occasionally talk about it, and I saw a chat real quick that said that means maybe there's just a few people that talk about it to some folks. These are going to mean different things to different people, of course, but I'd love to go to our panel with this kind of a third. We're encouraged, maybe almost 50% I occasionally, and then almost 20% no one. Emer, over to you. What do you think about this and what's happening and what you're seeing in your workplace?
Yeah, of
Maybe
course.
Workplaces around you.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think it is in an ideal situation, you'd want to see everybody with number 3, right? I think if 2020 has taught us anything, it's just how vital it is to create a transparent culture where employee wellness support is not only provided but encouraged. And, all the research just states, in fact, I actually read an article recently that stated 1 in 6 people are struggling right now with mental health at work. And so, when you think about it, considering the amount of time that we spend at work anyway, and especially the amount of time that everybody has spent just engrossed in work over the last year, all employers play such an incredibly important role and just have a significant stake in creating a culture that values mental health needs and actually provides support without stigma, and helps employees actually shape positive mental health habits. But conscious that not all employers are there yet. And so I just think, we all have a responsibility to continue to push that message, to continue to drive that conversation, both within our own organizations, but also on external platforms, and really start that conversation. And like I said, destigmatize it and honestly be vulnerable, share our own challenges. I think a lot of the time that's what people are looking for now. They're looking for tactical ways to deal with this, either within their own company or personally in their own lives. And honestly, I find that by being honest and open as a leader, and especially working in HR, that's the way to go.
Great. Courtney or Nadine, I'd love to hear from both of you as well on this.
Yeah, I'm actually pretty encouraged by this poll. I think awesome job, all the participants. The fact that we're seeing the biggest buckets of at least talking about it some is really incredible, and we're on the right track there. I wanted to share one thing that's really worked for me across a couple of companies that I've been at. Whatever your sort of chat tool of choice is, where people kind of get together and talk about things, I've had a lot of luck creating sort of a healthy work type channel, and defining that really broadly at first, so people can talk about ergonomic chairs or like the best keyboards, and you can build a little bit of trust there. And I've noticed that gradually folks get braver and braver, and we start to interpret healthy in a different way. And suddenly this past year I've seen people be very vulnerable there and say things that used to be easy have become really hard. Like I have to congratulate myself for going to the grocery store. It's like I'm really struggling. So if you can create that bridge and like bring a few people across with you, the floodgates really will tend to open, because folks are hungry to talk about these things, and it just takes a few really brave individuals to go first, I think.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Courtney.
I would agree with both what Emer said and what Courtney highlighted. I think this is about creating safe space at work where people can feel comfortable to share vulnerably. I also was encouraged by this poll, and I do think that I have seen over the course of my career shifts here where the stigma is being reduced, and the felt shame that people experience with struggling with mental health issues is also being reduced. And I think that's because people are feeling more comfortable being vulnerable at work. And Emer's right. When you're in a leadership position, you lead by example, and you show that vulnerability, and that creates that safety for the people around you to be able to be vulnerable as well. And it's also about creating an environment at work where people feel okay to show up with failures and flaws, right? We are not perfect, and our society can sometimes hold us to this expectation of presenting as perfect. And that makes it hard to be vulnerable and hard to really truly share where we are and what we're struggling with. And I think the more we can counteract that and create those safe spaces for employees, the more we're going to see, authenticity at work, and people being able to talk freely about and feel supported in their mental health journey.
That's great. Thank you so much. So let's jump quickly into the next section, which is mental health in a post-pandemic world. And recently, I think we've all been hearing of it, seen it in the press, and I think we probably see it in our workplace and workplaces around us. This great resignation that people talk about. The Microsoft Work Trend Index recently found that 40% of people want to change jobs in 2021. There's a lot, of course, that can fuel a desire for a new job. Folks may be looking for fully remote opportunities. may not want to return to the office, but it seems like candidate values are going farther beyond just flexible work options. After a year of pandemic and other stress, burnout, isolation, I think are familiar to all of us, something that I certainly can identify with. I moved to this job that I'm in now in the middle of the pandemic into a new state, and then worked remote. so I get that for sure. And so maybe top talent are looking for opportunities at organizations that prioritize culture, that prioritize bringing your whole self and mental health. So Nadine, I'm going to go to you with this question first. What do you think about this? And what do you think today's candidates are looking for in terms of workplace culture?
Yeah, so I'm going to lean into some analysis the Facebook People team did a few years ago that I really love, and I think it encompasses some of what we're talking about today. They identified 3 buckets of things that people want. They want to reach their full potential. They want to feel connected and cared for by others, and I'm paraphrasing these. And they want to feel like they're contributing to a greater good. And I think that second bucket of feeling connected and cared for is really what we're talking about here today. So the reality is that without a healthy workplace culture, none of those things are achievable, but especially like that lack of connection. And we are all especially feeling this desire for connection after having lived through a pandemic for a year. I've recently become fully vaccinated and have been like meeting with some friends and coming into the office now, and it feels so wonderful to be connecting with people that way. And I would imagine that's probably a big driver for people at this point. So they're really looking for deep connection. And fostering an authentic workplace is going to set us up for better providing that in the workplace.
That's great. Yeah, I think connection's big. Our workplace, we just started back last week as optional. And I feel like every time I come into the office, I say hi to everyone on the way to my desk. Like they're probably thinking, who is this person? But I'm so excited to connect with everyone that I'm saying hi to everyone. What do others think about on the panel? Think about this, what people are looking for in the culture, in a workplace culture, I should say.
I'm happy to hop in. I think, the last year has definitely shown us that employees are looking for work for companies and to work and be surrounded by a culture that actually aligns directly with their values. And, so much has happened outside of just the pandemic. When we consider the amount of, social injustice that has happened in the world, the amount of hate crimes and just like our Black Lives Matter movement. And I think more and more companies or more and more employees are looking for companies to speak up and out and influence the world around them and really speak up on behalf of their employees and on behalf of their employees' well-being. And I think that's a trend that we're going to see continue over the next kind of couple of years. So I think that's a big piece. And I think exactly, Nadine, what you said, I feel almost there's like a sense that we as companies have to solve for our employees. Like there is as an employer, I think mental health has been just in the spotlight, rightly so, over the last 12 months. And I think trying to care for your employees' well-being, both in and outside of work, I think is something that there is like companies feel a deeper sense of responsibility to do that. And I think more and more employees are also looking for a little bit of that. And I think that kind of comes back to the values piece. So I do think that's a trend that we've seen over the last few years, but I do think that's going to continue for sure.
Totally agree with all that. So well said. Yeah, I think values aligned work is really important. People are looking for companies that are going to be thoughtful and deliberate about how they build culture, like name it as something that they care about and something that they're focused on. Culture sort of happens whether you want it to or not. So it's very important to be thoughtful and deliberate about the way that you build it, where it can very easily get away with you. And, I think we have a tendency in the past past to think of work as happening in a vacuum, sort of disconnected from politics or anything going on in the world. And the last year showed us, no, like work is inherently tied to all these things. It doesn't happen in a vacuum, and we can't pretend it does. So I think, you know, folks are coming to us like wanting to sort of align their work life with their personal lives and their home lives, and really having no choice now that, you know, Zoom is in your living room, Zoom is in your children's playroom. Like, we're in each other's lives in a way that we really never have been before. And it really, to me, is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to get a little bit more authentic, to get a little bit more vulnerable, to embrace the strange place we find ourselves and really build something new from it.
I love that. I have loved seeing my team with, you know, toddlers on their laps, sometimes when they didn't mean to have toddlers on their laps, but the toddler had a different opinion, or animals, or, you know, all of the different ways that we get to be in each other's lives. But it also means that we're in some ways more connected, in some ways less, I think, as we've been remote. And so that's a great thing to think about. Emer, the next question, what does it mean to value mental health at work? We talked a little bit about that. Oh, I love that, Jamie. My son is now an official mascot of our HR department. I like that. We all should have a mascot like that. But what does it mean to value mental health at work? How do we show up, do you think?
Yeah, such a good question. I think we did speak a little bit, touch on this a little bit, but I think to truly value mental health, it has to be ingrained in your culture. I think too often mental health and solving for mental health almost becomes a tick box exercise. And I think that's when things go wrong, when, you know, employees might receive that one-off email asking, you know, telling them to look after mindfulness or take a deep breath. But, you know, if employers have done nothing to actually consider the systems, the structures and processes needed to really enable and empower employees to look after their mental health, you're not going to solve the problem. Everything will just be a band-aid. So if I think about just some of the things that we've done at HubSpot over the last year, we really doubled down on well-being and mental health. Things like organizing, you know, online sessions on the topic, as well as considering specific issues around addiction and caregiving. Just knowing exactly, Courtney, like you said, that intersection of work and life was just so in your face, and it was incredibly hard for so many different people. And our employees are burnt out and exhausted. And so, you know, we're also thinking about, we're giving our employees a global week of rest the week of the 5th of July so they can completely recharge. But I also think that, you know, it doesn't have to be big measures. It doesn't have to be expensive measures either, especially for smaller companies. Things like, you know, how do you build a peer support network with colleagues? Start a conversation with managers so they can recognize how to have a conversation around mental health, and embed habits that promote positive mental health within their teams. I think it is all about, you know, it can't be that one-off. It has to be an ongoing thing. You have to be transparent about mental health. I do think you have to be vulnerable and open about mental health. I've seen some amazing questions coming in the chat around, what if your employer isn't open to it? You know, how do you drive authenticity around that? And that's really hard, because so much of what drives an authentic culture is leadership and manager behavior. And so I think really just ingraining that and embedding that in everything you do is incredibly important.
Courtney, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm just nodding vigorously because I agree with all of that. Absolutely. Yeah, it's very easy and I think very common for a company to say, you know, take care of your mental health, you know, do what you need to do. And then the employee is like, well, okay, but what are my resources? What is the follow through? How do I do that? Will I be stigmatized if I do that? Will I be looked at as less than? Will I have fewer opportunities and less support? So that follow through piece is truly like, you know, where you walk the walk and say, not only are we giving you this lip service, we're also following it up with resources, with you know, actual leaders doing what we told you to do. Like, you can see them taking vacation, you can see them, you know, taking that time away, you can maybe even see them going to therapy, and you know how wonderful that is to sort of normalize all these things that we stigmatize and tend to keep hidden. We don't need to. And you know, the younger generations, as Gen Z enters the workforce, they're not going to do that. They're not interested in that at all. They're telling you about their therapy appointments. They're telling you about their ADHD medication. Like, they're so open about it. And it really is a breath of fresh air. And it really is an opportunity for all of us to sort of take that mantle and embrace it and kind of run with that and say, yes, like, this is, you know, we're all going to talk about it now.
I love that. Nadine, thoughts?
Yeah, I won't take up too much time here. I think Emer and Courtney addressed this really well. At 10% Happier, we've been, working on the same issues of how do we support mental health, especially during the pandemic. And we do have a very open culture. So we have leaders at the very top of the organization openly talking about their therapy appointments, and it's on the calendar, not marked as private. And we gave the team, we're still doing it, but every other Friday is an off day, and nobody's expected to work because we found that we needed more recuperation time as we were navigating the pandemic as a team. We're also doing a global week off this summer to give people a full rest. And so just trying to figure out what are those ways that we can support the team.
That's great. I think, I think we've all been talking about it's easier to understand that having that healthier, happier, more inclusive workplace will help you attract and retain talent. And as people are moving around, this is a time for our current employees and for future employees that we want to attract and retain that talent. It's hard though to visualize in the steps, and so let's go through some of those steps that we might want to put in place. And Nadine, I'm going to start with you, and you started to share a little bit about things that you're doing in your workplace, a global week and every other Friday. I'd be interested to know, is the every other Friday something you did before the pandemic, and will it be something you continue, and just how you how it looks, like tangibly looks in terms of programmatic at 10%.
Yeah, so we did not have every other Friday off before the pandemic. When the pandemic started in mid-March, we completely pivoted as a company, and we were working really hard on providing a lot of free programming to people in order to be supportive, starting with mental health providers, moving on to teachers, etc. And the team worked really hard, really long, and by the time the summer came, there was a lot of burnout, and we were worried about burnout. And so the every other Friday started off as summer Fridays. And then we got to the end of August and we were like, this is great. We don't want this to stop. And actually giving the team more time off was increasing productivity because people had more time for rest and rejuvenation. And we do our best work when we aren't feeling stressed and burned out. And so it actually ended up being just a good business decision for us to continue. So we changed the name, we call it COVID Fridays now. And we have them scheduled through the end of this year, and we'll reevaluate at that point. A couple other things that, that we've been working on. Number one, I just want to name our DEI initiative. We know that it's very important for us to create a healthy and supportive workplace for everyone. We're not perfect. We have a lot of learning and growing to do in this area, but it's an important piece of what we're doing to provide a good work environment for our team. And then just, a few other things to hit on here is, we have a very authentic culture here at 10% Happier. And so we put a lot of emphasis on not expecting people to show up like as a different version of themselves than they are truly. So we want people to be able to bring, themselves and all of their everything to work. Great example of how this is accepted across the organization. I was presenting company-wide at home 2 weeks ago about new performance management process that was going in place. And I got interrupted not once, not twice, 3 times by children, where I had to fully step away from my computer. It was a rough day. And everyone was fine with it. Everyone understood, fully accepting that this is part of who I am and what I bring, as an employee in the organization. And then, we also have a team that's very connected to our mission. And that's part of our retention. I think here at 10% Happier is they care so much about the work that we're doing. So many people on our team have been very deeply impacted by their own meditation journeys. And so having that mission driven, it's not always the case at every organization to tap into that, but we do certainly tap into that here. And just a little plug for people that are listening, we have a free anxiety challenge that is starting in our app next week that the whole team is like really pumped about. So I would check that out.
Super. Carolyn or Emer, things that you're doing in your workplace now that you can share what it looks like?
I'm happy to share a few things. I would say if you're in the US, healthcare can be very difficult to figure out. And if you're someone who is going through a period of depression or anxiety or any sort of mental health need, it's like the last moment you want to try and figure out a Byzantine healthcare system, and America makes this uniquely difficult. So, if you're in HR, if you're in the people team, you really have an opportunity to sort of work through that process yourself, have it really streamlined. So when folks need those resources, they are available to them quickly, and you can help them cut through any red tape, any long delays, because when folks reach out, they probably needed the help last week. So anything you can do to sort of speed along that journey should pay really big dividends. Obviously, time off has come up a lot. I think that is one of the most important things that you can do in the company, to really make sure that folks are getting the opportunity to recover, to rest, to get rejuvenated. So whether that looks like summer Fridays, mental health days, the week in the summer, which is a lovely thing to do. At Hologram, we're doing summer Fridays for June, July, and August. We've also just fully created a holiday in May. There were no good holidays coming up. It was too long between holidays. We just said May 3rd, I think, is a day off. It's our mental health day. We're just going to take some time. And often it really comes down to the team to sort of lead and say, this is a priority for us, and we're going to show it in X way. And if that's not possible for you, there are other sort of more lightweight things you can do. Employee resource groups can be super valuable. Make sure that you're connecting with the folks in those groups. Make sure that they have resources and the stuff that they need. Prepare resources for the situations you are likely to encounter. I've got my ready to go, sort of documents with a lot of resources for supporting teammates with anxiety and depression, supporting teammates who've experienced a trauma. So as soon as a manager says this is happening to me, I have some resources that I can give them, because that's a moment as a manager where you're like, I don't want to mess this up. I want to do the right thing for people, and I don't always know what that looks like. So being prepared for those situations that you might encounter will go a long way. Making sure that leadership really sort of walks the walk there, make sure they're taking time off and they're sort of loudly taking time off. That's what I like to call it. They're not just sneaking out. They're saying hey, I went on vacation and here are the pictures and here's what I did. And I found that when I came back, I'm even more productive than when I left. And I didn't even realize how burnt out I was. That's sort of loudly taking time off and displaying this is something that we can all do. This is something we can all model because we see it from the top. And a small change I've made, I do see a question about supporting BIPOC employees. I have started to steer away from bring your whole self to work in favor of bring your authentic self to work. And it's a tiny change, but I have learned, just from listening to my teammates of color, that you can't always bring all of you. Sometimes not all of you is accepted. Sometimes that opens you up to microaggressions or tone policing or other things that make work really difficult and unpleasant. So I've started to say, bring yourself authentically. Bring as much of you as you feel comfortable with bringing, and we'll work on the rest. That's our journey to get you to be able to bring your whole self to work. But until you feel comfortable with that, bring whatever you can, bring it authentically.
I love that, Courtney. I love all of that. I was thinking as you were talking about taking time off loudly, that earlier in my career, I would have never, it was kind of I'm out, but I'm still on email. Don't, you can still reach me. I'm not really out, that sort of feeling. And now I'm I'm out of here. I'll see you guys next week. And I do think that that's really important that all of us do that, so that our teams, whether it's people that we report to, people that report to us across the org, that everyone sees that, because I think it's a really important piece to model. Emer, did you have anything that you wanted to add here about what you're doing at HubSpot?
Yeah, of course. I love that, leaving loudly. I recently took some time off to celebrate my daughter's birthday, and in my out of office, I had like something about, going out chasing unicorns and eating lots of cake. And the amount of emails that I got when I came back, just being thankful and kind of celebrating the honesty, was amazing. So I was like, actually, we need more of that. We definitely need to lead from the frontier. I mean, so much of what Nadine and Courtney said resonates, and we're also thinking about it. Just a couple of other pieces to add in. So, HubSpot, we made a commitment to transition to a hybrid workplace, which we're doing right now. And so as part of that, what that means is all of our perks and benefits going forward are going to be office agnostic, because obviously we want to drive a level of equity across the board. And so a platform that we launched at the start of the year was Modern Health. So Modern Health, it's an awesome platform. If you guys haven't heard of it, it provides our employees accessible mental health support regardless of location, so totally inclusive. And so that was, again, off the back of feedback that we got from our employees during our regular pulse surveys that we host. And so again, as we think about the long-term initiatives and kind of putting in good strategies for the future, that's one that's been incredibly well received. Again, some of the things that I spoke about: global weeks of rest, we've had days off, we do no Zoom Fridays, which feels like it's kind of life-changing for me personally. And then some tactical stuff. So again, equipping managers and honestly just employees with, like, these are things that you should think about. Don't forget to take some time off. Don't forget to update your Slack channel or your Slack when you're actually finished work, to say, stop, don't contact me. Let people know your hours of work. We're a global company. And so, if you're working in San Francisco, if you're working from Dublin, you could be getting pinged after hours, and that's super stressful for people. And so be bold and let people know when you're available and when you're not available, and normalizing that, I think, is okay. And then completely, exactly like Courtney and Nadine said, making sure that our leaders lead from the front and talk about, what they're doing for their global week of rest, and that they're also taking the time off. And then I think just two other things that's really important is really, like, leaning into compassion and empathy right now is incredibly important. Like I said, we're global, and the level of vaccine rollout, depending on where you are in around the world, is different. And so for our US colleagues are back in the office right now if they choose to do so. But in Ireland and in Dublin, where I am, our offices are still closed. And so that, again, adds to people's stress and anxiety and mental health. And it's not a nice experience for folks across the world if you've one pocket of the population celebrating and you've another pocket of the population kind of down and out. And similarly in Singapore and Tokyo, where lockdowns continue. And so really, really leaning into that compassionate management and empathy, and recognizing those local nuances and acknowledging and celebrating those local nuances, I think, is important. And then I think just the final piece is, it's been tough working in HR the last year. And I think, a comment or a question coming in around how do we equip our own teams with that. I think for anybody in a front-facing role, I mean, for anyone working on the front lines, for anyone caring for an employee, they've been pulled more than we've ever been pulled before. And I think it's so important to actually look after our own teams and ourselves. And it's like, put on your oxygen mask first is a real situation and something that we have to do. And so something that we've spent a lot of time on is actually making sure that our own HR teams internally are equipped with what they need, first of all, to recognize folks that are struggling with mental health, to have good conversations with their managers, but that they are also caring for themselves, and making sure that we're pushing that, because just too often we forget about ourselves, which is not a good thing.
That's a really important reminder. I'm glad you mentioned that. Something that came to my mind is we just did some research at Bamboo HR, which is available on the website, and I'm happy to send the link out too, but just about how work had changed. And we got a lot of feedback on that it's actually harder to stop working when you're working from home. And that work-life integration or work-life balance, there's lots of different terms for it, but how do we think about, gosh, actually, no, I'm having lunch, or actually, no, it's, 5:30 and I need to go do this thing, or in the middle of the day, I need to take a break and do something with a child or someone I'm a caregiver for, or for myself, and so it was really interesting to see how people, even though they weren't coming into work, were still feeling that it was harder to differentiate and to take that time off. The pings, all the pings and dings that we all get at all hours of the day that our devices give us, and what that does to our mental health, I think is something to be that we can model really well as people in the space. So with our coworkers. So Courtney, I'm going to start with this next question with you. As you think about low-hanging fruit, kind of that, what are the first one or two things you would suggest that people implement in the short term? And I'd love to hear from everyone, but starting with starting with Courtney.
Sure. Yeah, I think I went through a couple of the things I would do, kind of work on the insurance side if you're in the US, really focus on equipping managers with the tools they need to have good conversations. And I can go a little bit deeper into that. We try to work with managers, especially in moments like a one-on-one, to make sure that we're not just skimming the surface when it comes to mental health. So it's very easy to do a perfunctory, like, how are you? Like, fine, move on. So I've got a set of questions that I use to sort of like help dive in deeper on that. And, it sort of depends on the situation, but it could look like, how are you sleeping? Like, what keeps you up at night? What are the things that you're worried about? What are you blocked by? So just giving managers the confidence to go that one step deeper and try to get a little something mental health wise out of the conversation before you move on to work topics. Can be something that is so small, just tiny in the span of a conversation, but can make a real difference when it comes to building that strong relationship and that vulnerability that can come into play later when the employee does need some help. They know that they have a safe space to go there. Obviously, normalizing the conversations around mental health as much as you can. And if you are in an HR, actually any role that you're in, you can lead this effort. I think you can sort of be the person who steps up and says, I'm struggling with, X, like I'm struggling with Zoom fatigue. Does anyone have any suggestions for that? I'm struggling with paying attention in meetings. I have this little like fidget item that I have purchased, and I put it by my desk because I have trouble paying attention in Zoom meetings. And it's sort of embarrassing to admit that as a people person and an HR person, but I put that into our Slack and people were like, yeah, me too. And I, fold a tiny piece of paper, or like, I have this item. So it really turns into a conversation. So I think anyone can take that initiative and take the lead on that and be a little bit vulnerable and share something that's a little embarrassing or weird, and hope that others will kind of follow suit there. I think communicating priorities and maybe even changing priorities, changing deadlines this summer, this sort of like Q3, Q4 could be something to think about. In the US, the world is starting to open up again. Folks may be able to see family, see friends, take a trip, do something that they haven't done in a year. And we're all trying to figure out our own comfort level and what is, okay with us. And, are we now agoraphobic because we haven't left our apartments and homes in a year? So, this is a unique time that we may need to say, this deadline can stretch a little bit because folks haven't had the opportunity to actually go anywhere and do anything in a long time. Like, what can we reevaluate? What can we, take another look at to make sure that folks do have the time to heal from what's going on in the world over the past year and a half?
Yeah, and as we think about short term, then I think a lot of what you talked about is also long term. But Emer, I'd love to hear from you. As we kind of lay out our roadmap, so to speak, on how we can be better and do better here in our workplaces. There was some short term things. How do you think about the long term?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think now more than ever, just as we think about culture in general, it's important to bring culture back to the basics. And like, to me, at the end of the day, your culture is all about your behaviors and values as an organization. So like everything you do, your initiatives and all of that kind of stuff should be in place, that should marry up to those behaviors and values and help activate your culture. But I think really to build a healthy culture, longer term, it's about thinking through what are those values and behaviors you want to drive as an organization. If you've already come out and said, these are my culture tenets, or these are the values that we drive for, do they still hold true, knowing that things have evolved over the last year? How do you put in place systems to actually measure those behaviors and values and really keep a pulse on feedback from employees to understand how you're doing. So say for example, we have a quarterly pulse survey where we test obviously engagement of our employees, but then we also ask for real-time feedback from our employees around what we're doing well and, you know, how can we improve. And I think doing surveys like that is one step, but you know, how frustrating is it to just get asked all the time and then to see no action coming from it? So it's all about actually listening and acting on that feedback. And I think then using that feedback as the basis of what you're going to focus on long term and what's going to drive long-term sustainable value for your culture. And also, what does your employee want? Like, I'm director of culture at HubSpot. I'm not creating a culture for myself. It has to resonate with our employees, and the programs and initiatives that we put in place has to be in direct feedback from our employees. And so I think really listening and thinking about that will shape your long-term initiatives. So I truly think it does vary. I think it depends on the organization. It depends on your demographic. It depends on where you're based, you know, depending on, again, location, what employees value will really differ. But I would really encourage companies and everybody just to take a step back and do that groundwork as you think about the long term. And I think just the final piece really is like not underestimating the power of the manager. I think, you know, Courtney, you kind of touched on this, but setting your managers up for success by really enabling them to have good conversations and to be the culture ambassadors for your company and allow space and time for your employees to engage in your culture is really important. So again, longer term, I think having those tools, resources, and kind of things in place is super important.
That's great, Emer. Thank you. You talked about measuring a little bit. Nadine and Courtney, I'd love to hear from you about how you're measuring or how you think, you know, how you plan things you plan to add to measure to see how you're doing. You know, at Bamboo, we have surveys and other ways that we do this through managers. I'd love to hear what you both do.
Yeah, we also do surveys, and it's so helpful in being able to see the trends over time and how the actions that you're taking are actually impacting people's lived experience at work. And so we actually do 4 surveys a year. We do 2 engagement surveys and 2 inclusion surveys.
Awesome. Yeah, similar here. We survey quarterly and put a specific focus on mental health in each survey. And that can look like, you know, asking about stress level. It can look like asking, you know, do they feel like they're encouraged to take time for yourself during the workday? Do you feel like someone at work cares about you? Do you feel like you're able to sustain meaningful connections with your work colleagues during this time? We also track time off, even though we have an unlimited vacation policy. We don't track time off to make sure that folks aren't taking too much. We track time off to make sure that folks are taking enough, because that really is kind of the biggest issue. And I did see a comment in the chat that said, you know, my team's really been reluctant to take time off because there isn't anything to do and there isn't anywhere to go. True, and that does make it more challenging, but that doesn't make it any less important. So we have really been trying to encourage folks to take, you know, we had the COVID mental health days that we've now transitioned to just regular mental health days once a month. So we want to make sure that folks take those. We want to make sure that folks take fuller vacation time, because, you know, a Friday, a day off is not really a replacement for that sort of long block of restorative time. Both kinds of time off are really important. So those are the main trackers that we use. I also would say, listen to the more sort of invisible signals that your team is sending. You know, if you're setting up webinars around, you know, mental health and no one's showing up, like, what does that tell you? Either that isn't the right sort of support tool, or you know, people maybe are like too busy to be there, or you know, they need another type of support. So it's great that there's such a wonderful attendance today. I think this tells us that we are hitting a deep vein here, and this is a pocket of you know, of interest for a lot of people. But you know, if you do something for your team and they're not able to be there, like, what does that tell you? Maybe they're too busy, maybe they're too lonely to even like kind of come out of their sort of day to day, and you've got to keep thinking on other ways to engage there. So there's you know, the hard signals and there's softer signals to pay attention to as well.
That's great. So we're going to jump into Q&A from our attendees. Before we do, we'd love to know if you'd like to see a demo, a personalized demo, not today, but in the future, of Bamboo HR and and or Workable. I'm at Bamboo HR, and we're the HR software that really works to set people free to do great work is our vision. And we actually do have a survey, an NPS, employee NPS tool that we offer, and our software makes it easy for HR to collect, maintain, study employee data, and improve the way that you hire talent and onboard new employees, manage comp, all sorts of great things, develop company culture. Workable is the world's leading hiring platform, and they provide in-house recruiters and hiring teams with more ways to find and attract candidates and move the right applicants forward, make the best hire you can in less time. And so if you want to have a demo of either of those, click on this and we'll move off that. Oh, I'm glad to hear that, Emily. We hope you love Bamboo HR. I've been here for over a year, and I just love what our software offers. So we'll look forward to providing those demos to the folks who are interested in that. You know, as we move into questions, and we probably only have time for a couple, this has been such a good discussion. There's lots of questions. One of the questions that I saw throughout, and I would love to hear what you think, is how do we engage maybe folks that aren't in HR or aren't on a culture team, leadership, who are less aware or interested or maybe even fearful of having mental health discussions in the workplace and acknowledging kind of the humanity that we're all dealing with. You know, how would you recommend that we approach that? Because that's a hard thing if it doesn't come to them naturally, or maybe they're just not even aware. You know, I think there's some of that out there too. Is there anyone on our panel that would love to give some advice on that?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in here real quick with two suggestions. One is go for the data. There's a lot of data out there that shows that mental health does have a direct impact on productivity. And so being able to demonstrate, look, our investment in this area will directly impact the productivity on the team, could be effective for some leaders. The other thing that I would suggest is just having a really direct conversation. We know that stress impacts the brain by increasing cortisol levels. And when our cortisol levels are increased, our prefrontal cortex shuts down, and we're just not as effective at work. And so when we're taking steps to impact that brain mechanism in the workplace, we are directly impacting how effective we are as a team. And having that conversation with a leader can sometimes move their positioning and create some softening towards programming around mental health and stress and healthy work environments.
I love that.
Absolutely
Any other
agree.
thoughts, Courtney? Yeah.
Yeah, just really agreeing with that. The data really is out there, and that's usually the first place I turn when I'm, proposing a new mental health initiative. I'll try and find some science, around what is this intended to do, and how can we all reap the benefits from it. It really can be a win-win for the teammate and for the company itself. And I think there's a lot of information right now that leaders should be aware of. We're here talking about the Great Resignation, this idea that up to 40% of people could be looking to quit their jobs. And, are we more scared of talking about mental health, or are we more scared of 40% of people quitting your company? So you got to sort of measure the fear and figure out, like, okay, this is an area where we really have immediate need, and we know the things we do can impact this. We know that we can have an immediate impact, and we can be one of the companies that folks are flocking to instead of away from, with a few simple changes. So this really feels like a moment to seize and try to get the leadership on your side through using, the data that's out there and the science that's out there.
And different people are motivated by different things, right? So it could be some people that data work, some people talking about the culture and who you want to be at a company, who you want to, what you want to represent. I think there's, thinking about what motivates each of us is different. Emer, were
I
you going to
think
jump in
that
and say
was
something there?
exactly what I was going to say. I think acknowledging that actually not everybody is where others might be in their journey around, destigmatizing this and recognizing that this is a problem, I think is really important. And so I think being able to flex your style depending on who you're talking to is also really important. And I think using data sources, like obviously externally and also internally from leaders, direct employees, can be incredibly powerful. But I think, it is so important to get leadership and management buy-in, because this can't be like a HR or culture-driven initiative. And too often it is. And I think too often that's when things go wrong. So I do think finding those ambassadors within the business to help drive this and like lead from the front with your employees is really, really important. And so I do hope that some of that helps the attendees.
That's great. Well, I can't believe it. This was the fastest hour of my life. But so helpful. And thank you to our wonderful panelists who I've learned a lot today, and I hope that our attendees have as well. I just want to say thank you to everyone for coming. And we are going to share out a recording so that you can have that. And we wish everyone a great week. And if you're at one of these companies giving Fridays off, we hope you have a wonderful Friday. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Bye.